So what can somebody expect from working with you, and what kind of companies do you typically work with? What's in your sweet spot?
I sort of characterize them into three types. There's the sort of startup world where, and their problem really is they're like a child in a toy shop. They've got all these possible avenues they can go down, and they're not sure which one to take. And it's not good not to know where you're going, you know, in any kind of activity in life. So they sort of need a certain type of help pulling a plan together, picking from many alternatives, and then getting going, because it's much better to get going than keep thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Second type is a company that's sort of already established but stuck. They're not really going anywhere. The team's good, but they've sort of lost that growth and almost lost the will to live in a way. It's not that bad, but they're sort of turning up every day, and there's no sense of forward motion. There may be some goals around growing sales or improving margins or reducing costs, but the kind of adventure's gone, you know? And they need help reinventing themselves. So, and again, it's about realizing all the assets they have and then deciding where they want to take what they've got. And then thirdly, it's a company that may be undergoing some kind of stress. So perhaps they've got a new competitor, or there's a technology shift and a threat, some kind of technological threat that's sort of, and they're looking and saying, how do we survive in this new world? Again, often they'd be surprised how well they can do. Having a plan, you know, is half the battle. And a lot of companies that come under threat panic, and they start cutting costs, and they start trying to drive the sales guys harder instead of saying, wait a minute, let's stand back and think. We already own this market. We already know our customers. We already have experience here. How do we leverage that to compete? And let's not, you know, let's set the rules the way we want them to be. Let's not be driven by this competition. Often the competition is some, you know, IT firm or some newfangled platform.
That looks all shiny.
It looks all shiny, but now the reality is it doesn't work, or the people running that business, you know, don't know how to get to market, or there's some weakness. And these guys are in a much stronger position than they think. But what they tend to do is panic and make bad decisions. And
do you typically find people that come to you, is it more of a proactive approach or reactive approach?
Oh, it's mostly reactive, and that's part of the problem, because they often are at a point where it's a lot harder to move on and come up with it's not impossible, it's never too late, but the later you leave it, the harder the slog, you know. So, but again, it's human nature. And I mostly deal with companies that have sort of felt, wow, we've got to do something. It's, you know, crisis time. It's when the leader, if it's the CEO or the owner or the president, whatever, it's when they've made their mind up that they want to bring about change. And hopefully they realize it's better to bring in a facilitator that can help them, or, you know, sort of navigate the process of doing a complete analysis of where the business is, and then looking at where they want to go, and then figuring out, well, what are all the 1,000 things that we could be doing today are the things we actually have to do if we want to get to where we want to get to. So, you know, it starts with the CEO. It has to, because
if the leadership isn't there, they're not gonna.
And if they're not interested in having another adventure or taking the company to the next level, then I can't help them, you know. They need to want to go on a journey.
They need to be open to it.
Yes.
If they called you, they need to be in it. They need to make the changes that they need to do.
Yes, they've got to feel that there's another episode, you know, to be had.
Not just giving up. So when you are working with those companies, can you give me an example of where, and you don't have to use your company names, but like a case study of where they were to where you took them?
Oh, there's so many. But one example, it can often be that companies are stuck in a modus operandi. It's the way they do business. And they don't see that there's a lot more fruit on the tree, on the same trees that they're picking, from at the moment. So often it's just a case of asking them, well, why don't you look for more work from the customer base you have today?
Right, right.
And I've done that with one company, and their sales have tripled in about 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was really just by going back to their current customer base and asking about other problems they could solve. They already had the trust of those customers.
Right.
And so they could get in the door, but they weren't asking the right questions.
Interesting.
And so that's been a good one. That's a sort of a sales growth thing, I guess. What I like to see most of all is that sense of energy coming back, where they are excited about their company and their business. And that energy then just results in success in multiple ways. And it really depends on what the original problem was, right?
Right.
As to, the level of success in terms of, getting from wherever we were, like from point A to point B. And my sort of little mantra is that tactics will get you from A to B, but strategy will get you there in a straight line.
Right.
And tactics, it's a windy road if you're on a tactics only approach to doing business.
And so what can companies expect when working with you?
Well, the basic approach I take is I'm not one of these people who wants to go in and talk to all the employees and do
Rally them
numerous
up.
interviews and then go back and then report back, because I feel that's just allowing everybody to come to the strategy session with an agenda. So I much prefer to work with CEOs who are happy to bring in their team. I mean, they can tell them we're going to talk strategy for the next 2 days, because it's typically a 2-day sort of engagement for me. But I would rather they come in, we're going to talk about the business. You should be able to talk about your business. If you're not able to talk about your business, you've got to ask why you're on the team, right? So one assumes that the direct reports to CEO can talk knowledgeably about the business. And we're going to have a very in-depth conversation, a very methodical but in-depth review of the business. We're going to talk IT, we're going to talk marketing, we're going to talk sales, we're going to talk relationship with the customer, metrics, you name it. And after a day of doing that, we kind of, have more or less covered everything. We haven't made any decisions, we haven't tried to solve any problems. We're just saying, this is where it's at.
Interesting.
So that's day one. Day two,
it's first hour.
That's certainly an 8-hour exercise, typically. Day two is about deciding where we're going to go. Like, where would we like to be? What's it going to look like, smell like, say, maybe 24 months from now? And we just define that. That's our destination, right? So once we have that in mind, we go back over our 8 hours of material and we pull out the big stuff. Like, this is big. We need to, revamp our CRM, or we need to, hire a new product manager or something. Whatever those things are, they're big. We don't know how big they are. They're just big. We then take those and we rate them in terms of how impactful is doing something about that on our ability to get to our vision, and how likely is it that we're going to have to do it. So you're looking for highly impactful things and highly likely things. And we call those things drivers, key drivers. And from the sort of 600 points you might have made in the situation analysis, we'll end up with, let's say, 100 key drivers. And when we rate them, very simple process really, we'll probably end up with 20 that are actually highly impactful and highly likely. And those become, we group those into affinity groups, and then those things become ultimately the sub-objectives of 4 to 5 key strategic objectives.
Wow.
And we're kind of done.